Hello everyone and welcome to my game design portfolio, and my name is Brian Gucher. First up is a game called The Ascent. So with The Ascent, I used another's gameplay for a multiplayer game, and I switched things up. I made it into a single player game with a drastically darker tone and a story that goes along with it. Instead of a colorful series of games where you race against your friends to reach the top, it first becomes a series of Colosseum battles, along the same gameplay, but for money, with a path towards revenge for the main two characters of the game, which you can switch out between, whether you want to play as the male or the female twin, with the other still fulfilling the other's role in the story. The next game is a large group project called Mecha Mercs. So with Mecha Mercs, my team and I wanted to create a game that was fun and casual, a match 3 game with a science fiction element that brings large customizable robot mechs and multiple characters to the front. It was my job to create the worlds, the characters, factions, as well as an early series of missions that the player may come across. The game was meant to be done with an agile development, with every week adding more and improving the product. I felt that for my teammates to get their work done, I would need to create a lot of the world and the general story before even the first week of development ended. This would give people a place to start with their creation of in-game items, artwork, and provide a good direction for people to go. Then I would create more story details, and eventually the scripts and encounters along missions. My focus was the world and the characters. The first thing I came up with was the races in the galaxy. Humans, wildlings, which are reminiscent of Fae or Elves, and their home had been destroyed, as well as the Baradu, who are an intelligent people who are mostly from a water-based planet with a focus on mercantile in their history. I came up with a series of compelling people that your player would work with, including your excitable and genius mechanic and your loyal friend from training. Then, I came up with 9 different brokerages, or factions, that you can do missions with. Each brokerage has a fully fleshed out leader with a detailed backstory and motivation, as well as a unique style of mech, with each has a unique style of fighting, that you can earn. Finally, I wrote the scripts and encounters lists for all of the beginning missions.
Gravity Well is one of my favorite ideas back from one of my early programming classes in freshman year. Essentially, you have 1 to 2 players placing 3 planets of various sizes around a base and then launching attacks from that base to fly through the various gravitational pulls in order to impact against your opponent's base or their defensive planets to fracture them. This will be a mobile game that's very simple to play but can prove to be very fun and competitive. Portal 2 has one of the best and most comprehensive level development kits available. This was the best level that I made during my free time, Complex Discouragement. It focuses on very basic puzzle elements such as the physics-based jumping you're about to see, as well as manipulating the thermal discouragement beams. This is a very simple timed jump, by the way, so you don't have all the time in the world, but it's pretty easy to do. Once you get this discouragement redirection cube, you have to place it just right so that you can hit all 4 switches that are available. There's the 2 you just saw that are on the ground, as well as 1 to the right of the door, and 1 on the wall currently behind and now to the left of the screen. When you hit that switch, it flips that and you can make a portal there and there, so that you can hit the 3 switches fairly easily. Once the cube is placed just right, you can hit that other switch as well. Once you have this web of lasers set up, all the switches are open, and you can make your way to the very end of the level.
The Traveler was one of my final projects, and the assignment was to take a unique leveling system that a classmate had created before incorporating it into a complete game design document with details on gameplay, story, art design, as well as predictions on the development details. One of the things I did that was key to my process was choose a company I would like behind the project. When I went with Supergiant Games, creator of Bastion and Transistor, it greatly influenced the predicted costs and schedule, story, and art to be more along the lines of the project they might be interested in. When my good friend Tim created a very detailed leveling system using weapons, he then put extra work into it by creating gameplay to go alongside that. I wanted it to be my own, but keep the same lines as the game he envisioned. So knowing about his preferences, I created a detailed action-based combat system inspired by Devil May Cry and Ninja Gaiden, before tweaking some of his control ideas to better suit the game, as well as adding a number of new elements to the combat. One of the biggest and most detailed elements of The Traveler is the story you go through. It starts in a fairly traditional world where you, as the young woman Rel, the heroine of the story, protects the last remaining town from the hordes of the darkness. After pushing off the wave, you decide to attack the cave they're coming from. When you get through, you find a strange rift that pulls both you and the man who followed you to keep you safe into a strange void, where you fight and kill a man who's angry at your character for just existing. You get a rift shard and are transported to an entirely new world. Your companion, whose soul is ripped from his body and is now attached to you, can sense another rift. You continue to fight through a number of worlds and collect rift shards, learning that you are a child born outside of fate and screwing with fate's plans, otherwise known as a child of fate. Once you assemble all of the rift shards, you can go to the home of the progenitor, where based on your actions, you can end the game of one of 3 vastly different ways.
Though unnamed, one of my most creative ideas came from a simple challenge to design a game around weapons. I decided on creating an FPS game with a powerful elemental-based gun called the Conduit. You start with Earth, a basic machine gun that when in this form is called the Shatterer. Once you gain water and can switch between the elements, it gives you access to the Torrent. A little after that, you gain the ability to combine various elements, and you get the mix of earth and water, a form called the Acid Rain. Once you have all 4 elements, you can switch between a total of 10 very different weapons at will. One of the projects that I did outside of class was for a friend, and it was made within RPGMaker. At the time, it was called Only the Farmers Win. I made a large number of NPCs such as guards and people within a tavern, quests that ranged from finding a lost girl in a small dungeon to finding a necromancer that had been terrorizing the town and taking him down. I also made all of the dialogue and the rewards for each of these quests. Additionally, I made 3 distinct maps, a dungeon cave, a large swamplands area, and a town on the outskirts of the swamp that included a couple of shops and an inn. Another game that has a fairly intuitive custom game creation kit is Legend of Grimrock. In the dungeon I created as a side project, you make your way through a puzzle-based dungeon, no regular enemies whatsoever. There are a number of different challenges, most of which has hints as to how to really solve them given the difficulty, though I made sure that there's really only one proper path and you can never lose a key item. There are riddles, hidden buttons on walls, pressure plates, switches based on torch sconces, a fireball trap that you have to get past by ducking into openings on the side, a button puzzle that open and closes trap doors in order to get across a chasm, teleporters, including a maze based on them where failing sends you back to the start, and pressure-based alcoves in a wall where you need to put items to trigger doors opening. All in all, there are 3 keys to collect and 3 very well hidden treasures that you can get as reward above simply making your way through the level. Zeppelin Guardians was a group project that I was in charge of for one of my latest classes. We wanted to make a bullet hell shooter style game with a distinct story that takes place in a unique world that meshes steampunk and magic together. We wanted a series of missions that each culminated in a boss fight and a story scene. Along each mission, you would get upgrades to your ship and face an increasing number and difficulty of enemies. One of the biggest challenges we faced was apparent right off the bat. In addition to really only having 4 weeks to create our working project, we had 3 members of the team, as opposed to the 5 that were originally supposed to be part of the class. While worrying, we persevered. We had 2 designers and a programmer, so I figured that we could make something decent with placeholder art at the very least. I spent the first week on the story and the characters while working with the team to determine the gameplay mechanics. As well as that, on my own I compiled some art from the internet to use as both inspiration and, should it go further, as an art and style guide. Then I spent the next week detailing some basic enemies in the player ship, as well as the upgrade path your ship goes through. The rest of my time was spent with a mix of testing and creating all of the mission enemy paths. Unfortunately, we couldn't do anywhere close to all that we hoped, but we still came out with a pretty fun prototype from the programmer and I, while our final designer did a lot of the work with the class and the reports that we needed to write. We used Trello to keep ourselves organized and regular meetings on Skype to keep us in contact. As well as that, if any of the team members had questions, they could simply text me. One of the things I put the most time and energy into was the list of enemies and their weapons. I looked at some other games for inspiration and ended up creating 10 basic enemies and 3 bosses that each were unique in both how they attacked and the strategy needed to survive while whittling away their health. I then created 3 sets of enemy patterns for stages 1 and 2 while trying to both balance the enemies with player growth as well as make each stage feel unique to play, match the theme of the boss's attack style, and regularly introduce new enemies. Last in this video is the final project from my scripting class, a piece of a Derelict Museum featuring unknown phenomenon created within the Unreal Development Kit. It has playable elements including 2 bots, ammo, weapons, etc. I put a lot of emphasis into the small details of the design, and each of the museum pieces is composed individually from available meshes, particle effects, and textures. I paid attention to everything from the floor tiles to how the columns merge with the floor and roof, to the realistically off placement of the boxes, to the wires descending along the walls or hanging from the ceiling, to the lights along the floor, to the musty atmosphere itself. Entirely within Kismet, I made a puzzle where if you followed the hint from the terminal with the flickering light above it to activate the spotlights over only the museum objects lacking a physical basis to their energy, then, much like a combination lock, the door at the end opens to a generator room with a second bot and an alien terminal that could potentially continue the campaign.